Welcome to tecversity. This is Venkatesh Natraj. Hope you all are doing great. In this video, I'm going to talk about server roles. Microsoft Server operating system offers multiple roles, and each role has unique purpose. In this video, I'm going to touch base on each role and we will have a detailed discussion what exactly the role is for. Before getting into the roles, let's try to understand the operating system of server. There are two types of operating systems: server operating system and client operating system. The name itself is pretty straightforward. The client operating system is pretty much what we see in our day-to-day life, like in our laptops or desktops. It could have either Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows XP or Windows 10 or 11. These are the client operating systems. And the server operating system could be a Windows Server 2003 onwards, 2008, 2012, 2016, 2022. And there are multiple variants in it. Now, what exactly the server operating system does? It manages the entire network logically. It manages the network, it manages the web, it manages the files. It could be a DNS server or DHCP server or Active Directory or a web server or a file server. It is a strong computer which manages the entire network logically, and it ensures the end-to-end security as well. So how exactly the server operating system works and how to enable these roles, this is what we're gonna discuss in this. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to talk anything about the configuration. It's purely about each role. With no delay, let's get into the details to understand how each role is different. Before getting into the details, if you haven't subscribed to tecversity, please do subscribe and share this video with your friends and family. Let's jump into server roles. So I have the Windows Server 2022 now. I'm going to show how to access the roles and we will have a detailed discussion about each role. So I'll click on the start button, click on server manager, and here I have two options. You can see on the server manager dashboard, we have this option called add roles and features. Or on the top right side, I have this manage option. Again, add roles and features. So I can click on this or here, it will take me to the same page. In this page, we have two options again, role-based or feature-based installation. The other one is remote desktop service installation. So we're gonna talk only about the role-based. So I'll select the first one, click on next. Here, by default, we have already selected for this server. So tecversity lab server is my machine. So I'm selecting it and clicking on next. So these are the current roles available in this particular server 2022. So we will discuss in detail about each one. So we'll start with, instead of going from the top, because there are some interrelated roles. So we will start with Active Directory Domain Control Services. So we'll start with that and then we will go by each one. The Active Directory Domain Services is about creating a domain. So this role, once you enable this role, this will help you to create a domain, a new domain, like a google.com or a microsoft.com. All these are domains. So similarly, you can create your own domain by selecting this one. So the description itself says Active Directory Domain Services stores information about objects on the network and makes this information available to users and network administrators. Active Directory Domain Services uses domain controllers to give network user access to permitted resources anywhere on the network through a single logon process. So technically what exactly it means, we have a domain and in each domain we have multiple users and different objects. An object could be a file server, an object could be a folder, a particular server or a computer. So how to restrict the user to access these things is what exactly defined in the Active Directory. Now, apart from this, there is something called group policies. Now, what exactly group policies is? How much time a person can log in and what is the time limit, what he can do or she can do, what a user can do, and whether they can change the password. They can change the password every day or every hour, or they cannot change the password, or they cannot click on the right click on the screen, or they cannot access the control panel. There are several restrictions we can impose on the users. So all these security permissions can be properly given using the Active Directory. So pretty much Active Directory domain service is to help the user to build a new domain, and if there is already a domain, you can create a subdomain or an additional domain controller. So that's how the Active Directory domain services will help the user to connect. Now there are other domain options like Active Directory certificate services, Active Directory federation services, Active Directory lightweight directory services, Active Directory rights management services. So I'm going to touch base on all this in a minute. So let's move to the device health attestation. What exactly device health attestation? So in the description, it's very simply saying device health attestation provides the ability to assess the health of the managed devices. That means, like I mentioned, in an Active Directory or in a domain controller environment, we can have multiple devices in place. Now we will have multiple computers, servers, user accounts, several things we will be managing in a network or logically. Now to understand each of these devices health, like we have printers, we could have scanners, we could have multiple devices. So to assess the device health, whether all these are falling under the right security policy and everything, this will help us to give the device health attestation. So that's the policy and that's the role about device health attestation. The next one is DHCP. The name DHCP is pretty much familiar. It's a dynamic host configuration protocol. It is assigning IP addresses dynamically for all the clients and for other services. Now, what exactly DHCP is? We have to configure a DHCP server and we have to tell what is the range of IP addresses it can distribute around. Now, the description is pretty much similar here. It says the dynamic host configuration protocol DHCP server enables you to centrally configure, manage and provide temporary IP addresses and related information for client computers. So just for additional information, it not only for the client computers, it can also provide IP addresses for other servers which has a temporary, which are ready for accepting the dynamic IP address. It is not recommended to give a dynamic IP address for servers. They have their own reasons on security reasons and other things. So it's always recommended to give a static IP address, but we can also give IP address, a dynamic IP address for servers and client computers and also printers and other devices which are in the network. So DHCP is pretty much distributes the IP addresses for the servers which are within the network. So let's start with the DNS server now. So DNS server is about domain name system. So what is the description talks about? The domain name system server provides naming resolution for TCP IP networks. Technically what it means is it will convert the TCP IP, that means an IP address, it will have a name for it. For example, when we say a google.com, we never know what is the google.com IP address is or microsoft.com IP address is, even the ChatGPT. So every website or every object in the network will have a network naming convention. So that naming convention will turn actually the backend is actually an IP address. So in order to, as a human, we cannot remember the complete IP address of everything. So we will assign a name towards it. So there will be a technology which will convert the IP address into name and name into a IP address. So that's the domain name service, domain name system. Now what exactly it says? So DNS server is easier to manage when it is installed on the same server as Active Directory domain services. So it is recommended. What is it's recommending is when there is an Active Directory domain services, which is like managing an entire domain, it is also recommended to have a DNS server along with it so that it can easily identify the required things and it will change the naming resolution easily. And what else it's saying? If you select the Active Directory domain services role, you can install and configure DNS server and Active Directory together. So when you are installing the Active Directory server or enabling this role, by default or by option, you can also configure the DNS server. But pretty much the DNS server is to convert the IP addresses into names and names into IP addresses. That's the naming resolution. It is how it is. So there are multiple things inside the domain naming service like a CNAME and other things. So we will have that in detail when we are talking about the DNS server. The other one is fax server. This is pretty much outdated, but still there are few companies which are still relying on fax. So the name itself is pretty much straightforward. It's about the faxing. Fax server sends and receives fax and allows you to manage fax resources such as jobs, settings, reports, and fax devices on a network or a computer. So this is pretty much straightforward. I don't think I need to give much explanation. Mostly right after the email inception, people started stopping using the fax. So that could be of multiple reasons, because it involves a lot of cost, and every fax nowadays, even the fax is getting into a PDF, but earlier it used to be a hard copy. But again, the fax is mostly outdated, so you can skip this part. The next one is about the file storage services. Under file storage services, we have two options: file and iSCSI services. The other one is storage services. Under the file and iSCSI services, we have multiple options like file server, branch cache for network files, data deduplication, DFS namespace, DFS replication, file service resource manager, file service VSS agent service, iSCSI target server, iSCSI target storage provide, VDS and VSS hardware providers, server for NFS work folders. So there are multiple things falling under the files and storage services. So at a high level, what exactly this is talking about? So the description says the file and storage services includes services that are always installed, as well as functions that you can install and help manage file servers and storage. So pretty much this is straightforward. It's saying that you can manage the file servers and storage devices in one place by using this role. So we will have in detailed depth review about this particular role by enabling each one, and some of them we cannot because we need an additional hardware, but as much as possible we will cover those in a different video with all the details. For now, you can consider the file and storage services is pretty much at a high level, which manages the file servers and the storage devices. The next one is host guardian service. This is very interesting. This is actually, I think from 2016 onwards, this is a new role that is added in operating system. It was not there definitely in 2012 or 2012 R2. I'm doubt whether it is there in 2016, but this is a very much interesting role that has been added in 2022. This is about we'll see the description. So the host guardian service, HGS server roles provide the attestation and key protection services that enable guarded hosts to run the shielded virtual machines. Now this is talking about other role as well. So what exactly this does is, when we have a Hyper-V role and when we create the virtual machines on it, prior to 2012 R2 or in 2012 R2 as well, I remember that you can copy the hard drive and you can take that hard drive to another machine and you can connect it and you can start working. So there is a less security, because if there is a very important virtual server running on a virtual machine, you can copy that virtual hard drive and you can take it as a backup of it and you can start using for your own purpose. Now from 2016, again I'm saying I'm skeptic about it, but definitely in 2022 it is there. When you create a virtual machine, you can also guard the virtual machine. That means that virtual machine hard drive won't work anywhere even if you copy it, because it will be protected. It is an additional security layer you are adding. So to add such additional protection layer, so this host guardian service will help you. So this is an additional feature or a role that has come from 2022. Now what exactly it says, the key protection service enables distributed access to encrypted transport keys to enable guarded hosts to unlock and run shielded virtual machines. That means this will generate some keys. Unless you have that key, you cannot run that host or you cannot run that hard drive from a different machine. So it's pretty much adding an extra security for the Hyper-V environment. This is purely for Hyper-V. It is nothing to do with other virtual environments. It's purely talking about Microsoft virtualization. That's Hyper-V. The next one is my favorite, all-time favorite, is Hyper-V, which is a hypervisor from Microsoft, which is enables the users to create additional virtual machines on Windows Server operating system. Whether you have a Windows client or Windows Server, if you enable this particular feature or role, it will give you a new console where you can start you can spin up virtual machines and you can drive it. So it's pretty straightforward. It is like a VMware or other virtual applications available outside the market. Now it is from Microsoft, so it has that in-house technology where it will work perfectly for Windows operating systems. The next one is network controller. So network controller, the description states that network controller provides the point of automation needed for continual configuration. Now the name itself is saying that network controller, it controls, this role enables you to control the network and monitors the network usage, like which devices are connected, what are the physical networks that we have spread across, what are the network topologies that we are currently using, and how is the IP addresses distributed. All this within a data center can be managed with this network controller role. So again, I will have very limited options to show this role in our environment because we are just running a virtual machine on a host. So I will try to configure this and I'll show it in a different video, but pretty much limited. So let's start with the next one, network policy and access service. So again, the name, it's very straightforward. It's talking about the network policy and how much we can give the access to the services. So it is again a straightforward thing, and what's the description talks is network policy and access service provides network policy server NPS, which helps safeguard the security of your network. So again, this is pretty much on the devices that it's connected for the network, and logically it will try to understand whether the security provided and the connection configuration, everything is in under control. So we have to define the policies here, and we have to make sure the access permitted to the devices that it is accessing to this logical network. So I think there will be some restrictions when I try to explain this because we have very limited network resources and hardware. So in a vast networks, definitely this will be a very good option to show and configure this. But in the current environment, in what I'm going to do in the tutorials, definitely we have a limited resources. I'll try to see if I can do something or add additional virtual drives to make sure that network policies can be configured. But for now, we can consider this as a least discussed, but this is very important as well. The next one is about print and document services. So the print and document services are extremely important in a larger networks because print and enables the centralized managing the servers. So companies like big companies will have several printers in each floor and multiple printers in a company, and that's spread across multiple geolocations. So you can give a print from sitting from India to US office or to Australia office by selecting the printer. But how all these objects are interrelated and how you configure this is by using the print and document services. So what exactly the description talks is print and document services enables you to centralize print server and network printer management tasks. So it will help you to connect to the network and to manage the printers, and you can isolate some of the printers, you can restrict some of the users to access the printers, you can also give additional permissions to users to print. So this is entirely at the printer level, at the hardware you can manage using this particular role. The next one is about remote access. This is also one of my favorite because this has several options within it. Now at the description level, let's see what exactly it says. Remote access provides seamless connectivity through direct access, VPN and web application proxy. Direct access provides an always on and always managed experience. RAS provides traditional VPN services, including site-to-site, branch office or cloud-based connectivity. Web-based application proxy enables the publishing of selected HTTP and HTTP-based applications from your corporate network to client devices outside the corporate network. Routing provides traditional routing capabilities, including NATs and other connectivity options. RAS and routing can be deployed in single tenant or multi-tenant mode. So this is pretty much about the remote access. Now, when with the current state in the organizations, we see people are connecting from different places of the world, and they are using either the VPN, which will directly connect to the corporate network or to the particular office network. Now, apart from the VPN, this will also help the users to access some of the resources using this particular remote access. Now, it could be a folder, it could be a printer, or it could be a file server. All these can be managed using the remote access. So I will be doing a detailed video on this with the limitations we have. Still, we'll try to build a different server architecture, and I will try to show. And it also talk interestingly about the NAT. It is about network address translation. So how exactly the NATing will happen in this remote access, that is also something we will discuss in the coming up videos. And the last word, it says it can be deployed on a single tenant or multi-tenant environment. So again, when it comes to the tenants, the tenant particularly in cloud computing. So we'll see whether this can happen only for a specific tenant, or it can be done on a multi-tenant, or it can be done at a hosting level. So we will have this see how exactly the remote access can be configured at all these infrastructure. So this is very important and interesting role. The next one is remote desktop services. In the remote desktop services, it has multiple things. I will be discussing individually about each of its offering. At a high level, we'll see what exactly the description talks about. Remote desktop services enable users to access virtual desktops like VDAs. We used to have VMware Horizon. Some of the companies will ensure their offsite or on-site employees can only access to some specific VMware Horizon and others like VDIs. They'll generally connect it. So that is something you can enable using the remote desktop services. And remote app programs. So this is interesting. Remote app program is about, like, you don't have a high-end license, but you have an app which is a licensed version, and you can distribute it by hosting that application in the remote app. Let me give an example. I have Adobe Acrobat. For example, Adobe Acrobat is a huge licensing thing. So I cannot give more number of users access to the Adobe Acrobat. So what will I do? I will have one license and host this application in a remote app. So anyone who want to access this, they will open to a web console and they will double click on the remote app, and that will open up in a remote desktop. That looks like it opened on the local screen, but it's actually opening from a remote desktop, and they can access it and they can finish their work. So with the limited resources, we can give access to multiple people at a time. So it's very useful utility, and I will be explaining in detail about this in the upcoming videos. This is one of my favorite topic. So I will do that in a separate detail. The other one is about use the remote desktop services installation to configure a virtual machine based or a session based desktop deployment. So this is again about the virtual machine management and making sure the particular server is available for the desktop based deployments. So we will have this again in our limited resources. We'll try to see how well we can configure this, and this is extremely important role. The next one is volume activation services. Volume activation services, let's see what it says in the description. Enables you to automate and simplify the key management KMS, host keys and volume key activation infrastructure for a network. With the service, you can install and manage KMS host or configure Microsoft Active Directory based activation and provide volume activation for domains joined systems. So it is at a very high level. I may not be able to show this in our systems because we have the limited resources, and this is extremely at a very high level and at a enterprise level. So I'm not going to talk much about this. I'll be skipping this part, but we'll see if we can do it a separate video about talking about the VMS or VAS in a separate topic. The next one is about web service IaaS. So web server is very important feature for across all the organizations because they have to host their websites. They should have their IaaS, So web server is one place where the entire organization manages their intranet or internet sites. And under this we have multiple options. One is web server, the other one is FTP server, and the other one is management tools. So each one have again multiple options inside. So we will have a detailed discussion about each of these internal features, and we will see how exactly this is useful for each in managing the web servers. So at a very high level, if you are using an intranet or a particular site, whether you are using a SharePoint site or anything, the web server is the key one which is running in the backend to ensure the connectivity is up and running all the time. Now at a very high level, let's see what exactly it says in the description. Web server provides a reliable, manageable and scalable web application infrastructure. It's a very high level. So we will do a detailed video on each of these. Probably particular to web server, there are 34 items within it. So we will have one video of each one. So there will be a lot of learning from web servers. The next one is Windows Deployment Services. So Windows Deployment Service, so the name itself says it's about deployment service. That means installation of Windows Server using Windows Deployment Services, and it can be done over the remote. That means it happens over the network. So what it says is Windows Deployment Service provides a simplified, secure means and rapidly remote deploying Windows operating systems to computers over the network. We have a vast network. Let's assume we have a vast network and we have to install multiple operating systems or clients or servers. So with this service we can ensure that the deployment or installation of operating system is safe and securely, and at the same time it will also adds that particular server or the client to the domain. So I will have a detailed video about this, and I'll show how to configure this and how to install this on our servers. The last one is Windows Server Update Services. Windows Server Update Services is also known as WSUS. It's about updating. Now we have multiple servers running, several clients within our network. Now every time Microsoft releases multiple updates, now each server or each client cannot be pushed manually. So in order to maintain everything in the organization, so we have to make sure all the updates are pushed at a time, and it could be a business hours, or generally it's not recommended to push it in the business hours, and ensuring all the servers are updated. So this is one console where you can see how many computers are patched or updated with the latest updates. And the description says Windows Server Update Services allows network administrator to specify the Microsoft updates that should be installed. So it very clearly mentions that the people who manages this will have a visibility like what updates should go into the client machines or on the servers, and it will get reports and see how many machines are compliant, how many machines have already installed the new latest updates, and how many machines are pending, and when was the last time the updates happened. All these details on a single screen, you can have these details. So this is all about the Windows Server Update Services. These are the roles. So these are the roles that are at a very high level, and I'm going to cover now on the other part of the Active Directory. I just only covered the Active Directory domain services. Now I'll touch base on the other 4 options available on Active Directory. So we will have in detail discussion. Let's talk about the Active Directory options and the roles that are available. I initially discussed about the Active Directory domain services. Now I'll talk about the other Active Directory related roles. Now let's start with the Active Directory certificate services. So what exactly the description talks about? The Active Directory certificate services used to create certificate authorities, CA, and related role services that allow you to issue and manage certificates used in variety of applications. So this is pretty much straightforward. Now the kind of certificates that it will issue. Now we have a domain. It could be a tecversity.com. Now it will also issue a particular certificate to the device so that it will authenticate that server which has that particular certificate is part of this domain. It could be even on the Windows network, if you are having a Wi-Fi, you can also issue a certificate at a Wi-Fi level where a particular certificate is installed on the server, then only the Wi-Fi can be connected. So it is pretty much useful in our day-to-day life. So this is the role which enable the users to create new and issue the certificates in an Active Directory domain controller or in an Active Directory environment. The next one is about the federation services. The name federation is explaining everything. So let's see what exactly the description says. The federation services provides a simplified, secure, identify federation to web singles SSO capabilities. ADFS includes a federation service that enable browser-based web SSO. So it is talking about the single sign-on and also the federation. Now, when we say federation, it is about talking two different domains. I have a Microsoft.com and I am talking from my tecversity.com. So this enables to intertalk between these two domains. We need a federation service, and that federation has to be accepted by both the parties. That means in this case by both the domains. So this is the role which will help the user to identify what are the domains that we are talking and how the SSO can be authenticated. In another example, you can log into Facebook using your Gmail account by authenticating your Gmail. So that's another way of federation services where the Google and Facebook has a federation. Similarly, for Adobe products, you can also sign in with your Apple devices or Apple ID or with Google ID. So that's another way of federation. So this is how you do the federation. You will configure the federation at Active Directory, and that can be helped. This role can help you to configure those. The next one is lightweight directory services. What exactly the description talks about? Lightweight directory services provides a store for application-specific data for directory-enabled applications that do not require the infrastructure of ADDS. Multiple instances of AD/LDS can exist on a single server. So this is technically what exactly is talking. It is a lighter version of a domain ADDS or a domain controller, where it will enable the users to authenticate using the lightweight directory services. How to configure this and how can we use it in a simple network or in a very small network, we will see in the future videos. But this is a very good option to enable this on a remote locations, so that you don't need to give the full access to the Active Directory or to the main domain controller. You can also have a lightweight directory services over there. The next one is about the Active Directory rights management service. So this is also talking about, let's see the description. Rights management service helps you to protect information from unauthorized use. ADRMS establishes the identity of users and provides authorized users with license for protected information. So this is very useful in a highly sensitive data, where we have a very sensitive data, and it will issue a license to the user, only to a specific user, not for everyone who are enrolled for this particular rights management service. They will have a specific license, and it will give access to those particular sensitive data. So we can also see how to configure this and how to enable this, and what kind of policies that we have, and how it enforces the users to not access the data. We'll have this in detail in the upcoming videos. For now, these are the Active Directory related roles that are available in this server 2022. Hope all this information is useful. I have covered all the server roles, and I will be doing a configuration on each role, and I will show how to use that in going forward in each video. Now I cannot show everything on a single server because of the limitations. So initially I will create a domain controller which is DNS and a DHCP and a WDS, so that by this environment we can spin up the new virtual machines, and we can start seeing configuring the other machines. So make sure you watch this space for more upgraded videos on this technology, and that helps you to learn more on the Windows Server front. I hope this information is useful. If you like this information, please like the video and share this video with your friends and family, and make sure you subscribe to tecversity and click on the bell icon for get the notification on the future videos. Have a good day.